Welcome to another CHRO South Africa webinar. My name is Sungula Nkabinde. I'm the Community Manager at CHRO South Africa. And today we're going to be exploring how to re-energize your workforce via your employee experience. Now, since the turn of the year, most, if not all of my engagements with HR execs in our community have started with a sigh or some kind of acknowledgement that the workload is far much heavier than usual. Some would say they were so exhausted that February felt like October. In fact, one exec who I spoke to as recently as last week said, yeah, it's been a hectic year. And that time was still in April. So, you know, the year is already taken a toll on everybody. I think it's a result of 2021 picking up where 2020 left off. And burnout is a very real issue facing employees today. And this just goes to show how drained we all are. And that's the big change that HR leaders face today, which is to drive transformation, digitization, the agility agenda, all with a workforce that is very much fatigued. A workforce whose exhaustion is driven by many factors, including personal stress, survival guilt in the face of job losses, a shrinking economy, a pressurized healthcare system, and also, you know, the fact that we are now forced into the fourth industrial revolution. We're working from home. People, the lines between work and home have been blurred. It's no longer work from home, it's living at work type of thing. And yeah, that's the environment we're all living in today. And in the face of all this, line managers are really struggling to engage with their teams and boost morale and increase productivity. In this context, we are going to be discussing how to re-energize your workforce. Our today's webinar, which is brought to you by Mercer, will focus on how to go beyond engagement towards an employee experience strategy that will re-energize your people. We have a very esteemed panel, which includes Steven Teasdale, who is the Global Head of Organizational Development, Change and Transformation at Discovery, Yemi Faseun, who is the HR thought leader from Lagos in Nigeria, and Keletjo Chiloane, who is the Senior Associate at Mercer. Thank you to all of you, and welcome to this webinar, and thank you for sharing your time with us. Now, before we as we get going, I'd like to start with yourself, Keletjo, because Mercer has recently published its Global Talent Trends 2021 report, which speaks to this very topic. What are some of the key findings from that research regarding the employee experience?
Thank you so much, Sungula. Look, you have already done such a great job of laying the foundation, just giving us feedback in terms of what it is that employees are currently dealing with and what challenges that is posing for the organizations that are trying to deal with a workforce that is exhausted from everything that has happened in 2020, and at the same time dreading what 2021 has started out to being and what it's likely to be for the rest of the period. What I'd like to share with you is our Global Talent Trend report and the results that have come through from that. I mean, there's never been a time like the present for leaders to show empathy in the way that they deal with their employees. The employees are exhausted, and therefore, in this year's report, what we have seen and what we like to highlight is that idea of balancing economics with empathy, and for leaders to find a way to do what is right for tomorrow, while at the same time enhancing the employee experience for today. Now, the idea with this report is this is a global report that Mercer conducts every year. For this specific cut, it will be the results for the South African employer group that we have spoken to. Now, pre the pandemic, the question was posed to South African executives around which strategies are they likely to adopt in the event of a downturn. And obviously, as I said, this was pre-pandemic. There was no anticipation that the coronavirus pandemic would hit us like it did. But when you look at the results, you can clearly see that organizations had been thinking about ways in which they can respond, with 50% looking at possibly looking at to better leverage a variable staffing model, and 40% looking at increasing strategic partnerships. What I'd like to highlight is the response that we got, that 34% were looking at possibly reducing the headcount, with 30% saying they would diverse from businesses that are underperforming. Now, this unfortunately has been the outcome with 2020, given the number of retrenchments and businesses that have divested from underperforming units. Now, what I'd like to highlight also on this specific slide is around the reskilling initiative or the reskilling drive, where organizations have said that even in where executives anticipated that even in the event of a downturn, they are unlikely to pull back on their reskilling initiatives. Now, what this speaks to is the idea that the future of work, or positioning the businesses for the future of work, has always been top of mind, and that even in a downturn, that is an area that executives are least likely to divest from. Now, as I highlighted that this is indeed a global report, what I'd like to just talk to you guys through is around the kind of responses that have come up from the rest of the globe in terms of what HR is planning to invest in. The first one are in North America. They're looking at the diversity, equity, and inclusion as analytics around that, as that being the top area in which they're looking to invest, with Asia highlighting that idea around reskilling and upskilling being a top priority. For South Africa, what we are seeing is that the highest focus among HR is around reinventing sustainably. And this does look different for different organizations, but it's really around understanding how you are positioning the organization for sustainability into the future. Now, talking about the employee experience, why is this necessary? Why is this important? Now, the employee experience drives competitive advantage, with 62% of executives agreeing that HR needs to rethink its paradigm around what success looks like around the employee experience. Now, historically, we've always spoken about employee engagement. However, engagement alone is not sufficient. It's not sufficiently predictive to say what the success of those touch points within the organizations are. What we have seen from a numbers perspective is, despite 48% of executives having the engagement matrices on their scorecard, employees, although they say they are happy with their organizations, would possibly still be thinking of leaving. So what this tells us is that engagement alone is not predictive enough. Now, the next point is around what the importance of human capital is, that people are the last competitive advantage. I know we always talk about how important the employees are in the organizations, and it's just important to understand that human capital still remains the most important component of business. Now, the last point is around the use of data and the rise of HR tech data in the workplace. This specifically is around how data can be used to better inform organizational strategies. On average, 85% of companies are already saying that they're using AI in one way or the other in order to plan for organization. Now, what's also important just here to highlight is that we need to remember that the employee experience is really the intersection of three things. It's around the expectations that the employee has as they walk into the organization, as well as they engage within the life cycle of the organization. The second one is around the environment that is created that supports the employee experience, as well as the events that shape their journey within such organization. Now, how Mercer sees it is around the employee experience being around or anchored around 4 tenets, or the employee strategy that is anchored around 4 tenets. The first one being around staying connected to your people, designing for health and well-being, co-creating new experiences, as well as a focus on target interactions. I'm going to now talk you through what some of those numbers are that we have seen when we ask various questions in this space. The first one is around that staying connected to your people. 22% of organizations that we have spoken to indicated that they've used enhanced employee listening approaches to monitor the impact of leader communication during the pandemic. Now, I think we would all agree that there has been such a load of communication that has been received by employees from their organization. Now, it's important to note that 22% locally say that they've used such or listening tools, but that this is much lower than what the global average has been, which was at 39%. Now, 50% of companies in South Africa use continuous feedback tools for path checks. Again, another statistic that is lower than what the global counterparts are indicating. Now, this topic is around staying connected to your people. And it's important to note that within the organization, that different generations expect different things from the organization, with Generation Z and Generation Y highlighting that for them, what makes them thrive is the opportunity to learn, while Generation X and the baby boomers amongst us would rather go for recognition as that recognition of their effort as that being the key thing that helps them thrive. However, what's worth noting here is that although the generation classification seems like such a cut and dry approach, this really isn't the only way in which organizations can split their employee groupings. There's the whole idea around creating personas and developing elements or touch points in the employee journey that addresses those personas. And to this point, we find quite encouraging that 69% of South African HR leaders say that they have engaged in a process to uncover what different personas want. Now, this idea around persona grouping is not new. It has been used to enhance the consumer experience. However, in the employee experience area, it is something that more and more organizations are seeing that they need to introduce and use in order to define the employee experience or the employee journey a lot better. The second tenet is around designing for health and well-being. Energized employees want an organization that is empathetic in the way that they deal with the employees. Now, when asked the question, what well-being plans does the organization have as part of caring for their employees? A good percentage of South African HR executives highlighted that they would look at enabling a remote or digital health check service, while 31% indicated that they would add benefits to address mental and emotional health issues, and the same percentage saying that they'll introduce a mental or emotional well-being strategy. What I'd want to highlight on this one is globally what we have seen in terms of the priority, the addition of benefits to address mental and emotional health issues has come out as the number one priority globally. However, it is still quite comforting to know that locally that is still in the top 3. What I thought to highlight here is around the 28% that said that they would train managers to spot mental health issues. In setting the scene, Songula, you have highlighted that managers are struggling, right? Managers are struggling to manage in an environment that is different from what they had previously managed in. And therefore, the idea that managers need to be trained up to identify when an employee is struggling. And although they themselves might not be the one to set up those solutions, they can at least point the employee in the right direction. Now, pre-pandemic, 38% of organizations said that they had health and well-being strategies in place. This number, in terms of what organizations are doing post-pandemic, is that 66% have improved or are planning to improve their psychological, mental, and emotional well-being analytics to address some of the challenges that employees have experienced in the last couple of months. Now, pre-pandemic, when it comes to co-creating the new experience, 6% of the HR teams believe that they delivered an exemplary employee experience. And I think we can all agree that that number is quite low. We would want it to be much higher than that. And now, so it's quite encouraging to see that during when we did the current survey, that 69% said that they would use design thinking and interactive processes to co-create new employee experiences. And this just talks to the idea of taking the employee with you such that you're not creating employee experience, you're not putting in strategies that are going to be done to the employee, but rather you are co-creating those experiences with the employee. Now, when it comes to some of those touch points or those areas that this co-creation would, or how it would happen, 58% said that they'll journey map critical experiences for the employees, while 56% said that they would listen better. 56% would implement continuous listening and feedback platforms. Now, these are just some of the things that employers say that they would do in order to enhance the employee experience and co-create such experiences with the employee. The last area or the last tenet that I want to highlight is around the focus on target interactions. Now, energized or engaged employees are looking for efficiency in the way that they deal with the organizations, efficiency in the way that they deal specifically with the HR processes that support their journey as employees. Now, when asked the question around the technology that organizations are looking to invest in, 48% said that they would look at remote healthcare or telemedicine technology, and 48% said that they would look at the onboarding or online portal tools with the idea that if that can be or technology can be used to support that, then the process is that much more efficient. There's 41% around the colleague recognition tool. Again, something that is unfortunately in the South African context much lower than what our global counterparts are saying, specifically around that colleague recognition tool. So the idea here really is to say that there is technology that can be implemented that can help with each of those critical or target interaction throughout the employee life cycle. Now, just to close off just the section around the creating a great employee experience strategy, it is important that you measure the experiences through a continuous listening and analytical tools, that you design for better employee experience, taking the employee with you along the journey, and that you enable all of this with technology, both in the HR processes and just digital technological transformation as a whole. And that the idea is these tenants create that great employee strategy the employee experience strategy that can help organizations energize their experience. Now, the question is, what trends have we seen that have accelerated? the idea around the whole person agenda, especially so in a world where we are working often remotely from the rest of our colleagues, and in places where we're working at home. And so it's very difficult to draw the line between what is work and what is home. So the idea that you need to understand people and their realities, both inside and outside work, in order to support them better. The increased duty of care for employee well-being, especially in light of the exhaustion, the grief, and the fatigue that our employees are currently experiencing. And just the rethinking around the HR model that supports each of these interactions. Now, what are leading companies doing? Leading companies are supporting managers to make health and well-being a priority, supporting them in terms of the kind of training that they're giving them, supporting them in terms of the conversations that they are having with managers in this space. Leading companies are also redesigning experiences that will have the most lasting impact. I mentioned the idea around the onboarding process as an example, as well as some other initiatives that they're taking in order to redesign experiences for employees. And this one really speaks mostly for those in terms of rethinking or the purpose of the office, and understanding that offices are not meant to just go work on your laptop in a little cubicle, but the idea that they're meant to be collaborative spaces such that they've got a different purpose than what they might have historically had. Now, in terms of the transformation agenda, the transformation drivers, you need to co-create new ways of working with your employees, and the idea around the target interaction model to redesign HR. And lastly, anchoring on the idea that South African HR executives have highlighted reinventing sustainably as the key thing or the key focus for the year. It's around reinventing for value, understanding what employees want, as the second one around reinventing for flexibility in terms of where work is done, how work is done, and some of the benefits that accompany that kind of flexible thinking. Lastly, reinventing for sustainability. This one would look at organizations thinking broader than what would have historically been their key shareholders, as an example, but understanding the stakeholder landscape with employees being a core to that stakeholder landscape. I think this would then just bring a summary in terms of what we have seen from our data and our study around the employee experience, or creating a better employee experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Keletjo, for that really comprehensive presentation, looking at the employee experience and how organizations are approaching it throughout the world and in South Africa. My next question, I'd like to come to you, Steven, because Discovery has been kind of a beacon of light in how it's responded to the pandemic, not only because it's playing a leading role in South Africa's initiatives to drive, to find the vaccine and the rollout of the vaccine, but also internally. I spoke to you when you said that, since COVID, your engagement scores have been through the roof, and really outperformed the global benchmarks in terms of performance benchmarks within the organization. What's your secret been?
I don't know if it's a secret. It's out there in everything we do. And if I had to put many things, it's a bit like employee experience. There are many components, but for me, it's purpose. We have a very strong sense of purpose, and it's come alive, and it's become very visceral in this context. So, when we talk about making people healthy, enhancing, protecting their lives, it's very easy to see us doing that in this current context. So that kind of played into it. And I think there was a national movement around getting behind a collective cause that kind of helped us as well. But within that, we've seen a huge amount of energy being kind of pulled together through our employees. And it's the most phenomenal thing to see these cross-functional teams, these people who probably typically in a typical normal business would not be working together, but find themselves in a room solving a problem that is very wicked and messy. And we're very proud of the quality of people we recruit, and to see some of these minds come alive has just been incredibly humbling, but also massively energizing. As and that creates energy, and that energy shows up in these results that we've been seeing across the board. And I must say that it's not an accidental thing either. We need to just give credit to so many of our leaders and our colleagues out there that are doing very deliberate things to create these experiences. A lot of what we've just talked about are the things that we are trying to get right in our business. So employee experience, for example, is not something new to us. In fact, we are really pushed to kind of match our customer-facing colleagues in the space of consumer experience. And so we've got lots to learn from them, and we've been able to bring that in. But particularly, some of my colleagues that have done just phenomenal work in the space around developing personas around people that we don't even really know yet, but may well arrive in our organization at a point in time. And then how do we create experiences for them? I think just sort of reflecting on the conversation now, maybe the challenges we still have are, that at what point does, this design thinking need to become more of a mindset than a process? Because there's processes, and that's incredibly good. But yeah, you have to go through the process to get the mindset. But really what we're trying to do, I think, in the organization is almost entrench the thinking about being human-centered into every one of our interactions, so that we can create a sort of a response that is, you can have several people in a room that are all quite different, and they respond differently, and that's where the learning is. And then if you combine that with something like diversity and inclusion, you're starting to find magic there. And I think that's really we can start to solve problems we haven't even thought about yet. So we can really start to do some incredible things. But there's some big challenges to solve for all of us. And I think the only way to do it is through this methodology that has just been shared with us around being more human-centered, being more approachable as a leadership, to being able to offer opinions. It has a huge downside as well, and I'm waiting to hear from Yemi, but one of the big challenges around this is also a massively engaging and purpose-driven activity, which is hard to switch off from. So, as we're doing this thing, it's not a case of people being driven with a whip to deliver something. It's people who are driving themselves to do incredibly good work, and they're loving it, and they're engaging at a level that potentially could get dangerous from a health and wellness perspective. So these are challenges we have to manage, and I look forward to hearing from Yemi how we could probably look at managing some of that from a health and wellness perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great segue into my question for you, Yemi, with regard to the whole burnout issue. Steven has just touched on the fact that, it's one thing to keep people engaged and have them involved in work that drives them, but also that leads to overworking, because you're achieving a common goal, and you're never switching off. The fact that we're all working from home, and the lines between work and the home are very blurred at the moment is a red flag, or maybe an orange flag for overworking employees. On the flip side of that, you've got organizations who are dealing with a lot of business pressures. Economies are suffering the world over, and they are focused on business issues which might not be aligned with people issues, such as the employee experience. So how would you say is the best way to get organizations and people leaders to prioritize the key issues, whether it's people issues or business issues, whenever those are not aligned?
Okay, thank you. Thanks very much for that. I think that before 2020, we had mouthed the notion that employees are our greatest assets. But 2020 drove home the point greatly that yes, technology is great as an enabler, but without people, the business might really suffer greatly. We built technology and new ways of working around people in the last 1 year. There were so many things we took for granted, but as soon as the pandemic hit, we realized that at the center of all the processes, technologies, ideas, innovation, at the center of all of that was the workforce. And we started doing things differently. And yes, you're right, Sungula, in the last 1 year, we've got work became wherever work is. It's no longer work from home. Life is no longer on different parallels. We are on one continuum, and now we are weaving in and out of life, into work, into learning, into socials, and everything is possibly online right now. So we've seen that the employee needs to be the greatest asset notion of the workforce was driven home directly by the pandemic. And now things seem to be, no, not that things are slowing down with regards to the effects of the pandemic, but now that we've learned a bit more in terms of how to survive and thrive alongside the virus, we are beginning to see that a lot has happened to the workforce, and we need to do something a bit more so that they can remain energized and continue to thrive in this new phase that some people are calling the new normal, some people are calling post-pandemic. And what I see is that organizations or organizational leadership, therefore, must prioritize the need to keep the workforce engaged. And let me quickly say that I do not believe that we can have employee engagement initiatives re-energizing the workforce without carrying the employees along. I mean, the initiatives are called employee engagement initiatives. Why are we leaving the employees behind? And I have said this before, that it's like human resource practitioners and leadership. We are taking on too much of responsibilities. And when I say leadership now, in this case, I mean organizational leadership. We are taking on too many responsibilities that should sit with line managers of the employees. Employee engagement is not the sole responsibility of human resources. It is a shared responsibility. And the earlier we know that, the better. HR is sitting on the 4th floor in a particular building in a workforce of 1,000, 2,000, 18,000 people. It cannot be the responsibility of human resources to know exactly how the entire workforce will be re-energized through an employee experience perspective. It is human resources owning the design and the process, but line managers taking over the direct responsibility of employee engagement. So I am saying now that I'm not trying to minimize the importance of human resources in the entire process, but I'm saying that the primary responsibility of ensuring that the workforce continually is engaged is that of the line managers. So that's point number 2. Then the third thing I'd like to say is that we've entered into a phase where we have multi-generations in the workforce. The millennials are almost taking over right now. My last life, we had about 60 to 70% of the workforce being millennials, but we still have the older generations. This is the era of D&I. It is huge. Leadership cannot afford to not recognize how diverse and inclusive the workforce should be. And if you look at the entire human resources verticals, D&I must be taken into consideration from one end to another. D&I, how we reward, how we performance manage, D&I, how we attract talent, how we, the training that Sungula, who is a baby boomer, will go to might not impress me as a millennial. You know what I mean? So we have a bank in Nigeria called Sterling Bank, and they say the bank of the one customer bank. The workforce is gradually becoming a one employee workforce. What I'm saying is that 5 of us are in the organization, and the way I relate with Steven, must be the way Steven wants to be related with. So for Keletjo, so same for Sungula, and same for me. So we need to do constantly a deep dive into, what employees really want. And that cannot happen except we have a design thinking approach. And Keletjo has made allusion to that. Steven, the same thing. We start with the employees. We design the process with the employees. We monitor, measure progress, and we constantly come back to employees because we are cooking the food for them. Let's involve them in the kitchen rather than just leave them and give them whatever is available. So gone is the era where the policies and practices and processes of people management starts with human resources and leadership, and then it ends with employees. No, we've changed that paradigm from starting with the employees, right? Getting them involved, the buy-in from the onset, and then we're serving them the dishes. It's a more palatable meal to eat rather than being surprised by initiatives coming through us. And the last thing I'd love to talk about, because Steven stole my script, the last thing I'd love to talk about is really technology. All of this is hinged on what technology is allowing us to do. We were struggling from a culture perspective in many organizations when we were all working in our offices. Now imagine that I don't even see my colleagues anymore. How are we going to continue to embed culture in our organizations? Technology can make that possible. And let me say, lastly, on this point, that what will work for organization A might not be the same that will work for organization B. It's going to be a fit for purpose. The life cycle of one organization is different from another. So human resources and leadership from an employee experience perspective must avoid the temptation to do copy and paste, because it's happening in this organization and it's working for them does not necessarily mean that if I copy and paste the same thing in my organization that it will work. There are universal principles. There are timeless principles around employee engagement, but when it comes to implementation, they have to be contextually implemented so that we don't run into murky waters. That would be my thoughts around that.
Thank you very much, Yemi. And I'd just like to point out to the audience that Yemi referring to me as a baby boomer was just by way of example, and in no way a reflection of the facts. I am indeed a millennial, so just for factual purposes, let's just be on the same page in that department. Back to the conversation at hand. I'd like to touch on something that you mentioned. It's a question we've already received, and I want us to delve into it right now while I put this poll up about wellness. I would like our attendees to just fill in what has then been the approach to their wellness activities, whether you've ramped up or not. That you can read while I ask Steve a question relating to what Yemi said. We have a question from Voichiuli, who says, where does culture fit in this work from home environment? How do organizations ensure culture is maintained in this current world of working from home? As Yemi was saying, when you don't see people every day, when you're not walking past each other's offices to catch up and ask each other about each other's weekends and so forth, how do you, build that culture that is the life and blood of your organization? Steven, what is the solution?
So I think that the first thing to say is nobody knows yet. We did a lot of theories because the point is that there's some people, and I think who have maintained culture in the current 2 years, and it's gone well. I think we will post the pandemic. We're in a different context altogether. So we're not forced to be in one place, or our suppliers, our customers are all, and you've got choices. We've got different structures to kind of work within. You've got a lot of people half the people in the business, half the people out. And I think so we must just understand that whatever we saying now is a theory, it's not a fact. So, but what we have to do is we have to create, and the way that we're thinking about it is we need to create our office as a magnet. So we're giving people incredible experiences when they come in to the office to collaborate, engage, innovate, And that's from everything to the technology that's available, that's pervasive and open to everyone, the spaces that we create, the environment we create, the leadership we need to encourage that, removing friction from people coming to engage. But one of the things which we will do is we will put structure to this thing. We will put a sequence that we do connect and we do touch with sides with our colleagues. And what's really important is to look at that value chain of work that we operate in, because I think a lot of teams have stayed very close during this time, but there's a wider network that needs to be needs to be managed actually in a very subtle way. And one of the things which Keletjo was talking about was this continuous learning, the organizational network analysis. These are things which can guide us when we're starting to veer off course, to understand where people are. And very much to Yemi's concept of this workforce of one, we can start to understand a person has a experience, we gather data how they experience that thing, and we can start to then input it back into their experience afterwards, a personal experience. And then the cool part about it is we can start to do this digitally through nudges, not something your manager is necessarily doing, but also managing your leaders to nudge to have certain personal interactions. So if there's a reason why I haven't had a chat with my manager for a while, I'll probably, both of us will get a note saying, or some kind of nudge saying, shouldn't we be having a chat? Last time you had a chat was X amount of time ago. So these things are emerging, but we're going to have to do a lot of work, and it's going to be so much fun to reimagine culture and culture work. But it's certainly not a fact. It's about experimenting. And then to the point that we spoke about in the presentation earlier, is we have to measure this stuff incredibly carefully, and because we need to know that it works, not guessing that it works, because it is filled with emotion and it's filled with a sentiment that is so diverse. And one of the biggest fears I have is that you can have an incredibly strong culture, but that culture can only be resonating with those people of a certain set, and those people who are in the office versus those people who are out. And managing that is probably one of the things which I'm really focusing on with an incredible team that I have around creating experiences that really do create inclusivity, connectedness, and certainly tapping into the diversity of thought across a number of different paradigms.
All right, thank you, Steven. The poll results are in, and it's very interesting. I'd like you all to address the poll results when I do come to you. But here's the poll that I put out: is has your organization put more effort towards wellness, and if so, to what extent have employees made use of mental wellness initiatives, for example? So I'm basically asking, have you put more effort into wellness? And if so, what's been the impact thereof? And the results are quite balanced. 35% have said we've put a lot of extra focus into wellness, and that has been reflected visibly in improved morale and energy within the workforce. 38% have said we've tried to do a lot more to drive financial and mental wellness, for example, but the uptake has been limited due to a variety of factors such as shame and stigma around mental wellness, for example. 29% equally have said, we really haven't had time to focus on wellness because we are still putting out fires left, right, and center, which really speaks to the topic of, everybody is still very much overwhelmed at the moment. Keletjo, I'll come to you. Firstly, what's your thoughts on the poll results? I think you're on mute.
Almost.
You've got a very bad line from you, Keletjo. Is it just me? I think there's something wrong with your audio that side.
Yeah.
I'll come to you just now, Keletjo. Let me start with Yemi. What are your thoughts on the poll results?
Okay, I think whatever you guys are witnessing on that side is possibly the same thing on this side as well. You're so right to say that organizations have been overwhelmed in the last couple of months in terms of the effect of, number one, the pandemic on life and living, and also in terms of workplaces practices. And what we have seen, therefore, as we turn a new year in 2021, is that more organizations on this side are now focusing on wellness and total employee well-being. I promise you that in the last couple of months now, we've had many conversations around mental health of the workforce. And that's because, let's not kid ourselves, people have been ill and they survived the virus. People have had to take care of loved ones and it was traumatic. Some lost their loved ones and we expected them to still come back to the workplaces with their whole or total selves. It's difficult. So what we're seeing, the conversations now are around wellness and the need to offer employee assistance programs. If you remember that before now, HMO was key. It was almost a competitive advantage. If you want to go into any organization and the first thing you want to ask, apart from the remuneration, the salary is, oh, is there a health management policy in place? Once you have that, yeah. But before we knew it, it became standard, especially in my environment. It became standard for everybody to have an HMO. But because of the effects of the pandemic, HMO is not enough. HMO is definitely not enough. And what we have seen is that some organizations are on their own adding to what employees can get in terms of assistance, post-trauma conversations with professionals, just conversations around what can we do, what else can we do to help you? And the response from the HMO guys in Nigeria is to say that the offerings are now being extended beyond the normal healthcare services that we witnessed in the last couple of months or years. It's now been extended to cover other areas because of the experiences brought about by the pandemic. So for organizations that will be ready for the now of work, we can't be talking of the future of work anymore. The now of work is here. For any organization that will take that as a competitive advantage, there is a need for them to therefore quickly pivot through some sort of agile processes into what else can I do for my employees, for my workforce, so that they continue to survive and thrive, because ultimately that will impact on productivity and stellar performance for the organization. So the response has been around employee assistance programs. It's now HMO plus rather than just HMO. And that is as a result of what people have gone through in the last couple of months, either personally or maybe loved ones, whatever the case might be, or even colleagues. Some of our colleagues, we left our offices sometime last year, March or April, and they're not joining us anymore for whatever reason. Some have moved on, some have passed on and all that. So we need to manage different dimensions of the impact of the situation of the last 12 to 13 months on the workforce, and organizations are responding to this.
Thank you, Yemi. Keletjo, you want to try again, see if your mic is better? Oh no, it's still a bit croaky. Maybe try log off the call and come back. Stephen, look at the results. It's very balanced. What's your comment firstly on the results? Secondly, just speaking to issues around mental wellness, employees have lost family, colleagues. The disease has really taken a lot of lives. So on one hand, employees are grieving on a mass scale. Secondly, there's the job losses. Employees are having to support family members who've lost their jobs. So from a mental wellness point of view, I think the global population is under immense pressure. In fact, more than I think has ever been the case. How much do you think is being done? And if so, are we doing enough in this space?
So maybe the first question is a reflection on the results, and the one that really stands out for me is this area of stigma, and it's the one that I grapple with the most in trying to solve. And it's quite funny if you look at our, we're in 23 different countries now, and South Africa seems to struggle with it a little bit more than others. And I'm not sure, there's a lot of debate why that might be, but I'm really grappling with how to kind of get that resolution where you find enough safety for people to step forward around the stigma around mental health, because in reality, it's something which we all face at one point in time. It's sometimes just the degree of it that differs. And so that's something which I really, I've got some incredibly bright people in the team who are looking at that a lot, and how do we do it in our context. And to the point of the colleagues on the call, what's worked in one organization don't necessarily work in another. And we really do need to think about, in our context, how do we address that. To the other point around this incredibly traumatic period we've been through, it's been so pervasive and touched all of us. And at one point it was distance, and then it became very real to us as we lost friends, colleagues, family, what we do. I can only talk about what we doing. We helped a lot of people through sessions with clinical psychologists on a mass scale and scalable level. A very clever way of kind of taking people through that the journey of grieving and understanding how they can respond. But probably to Yemi's point, we've got just an incredible service called Healthy Company, which is a discovery product. It's our version of an EAP. And, like most things with discovery, incredibly accessible through multiple different channels. So some people are very comfortable to call a counselor up and have that kind of conversation, but other people are quite comfortable anonymously connecting via WhatsApp and asking questions before they connect at a level that can really get them really specialized care. And then asking about the channels we've created is that we've kind of opened it up for them to connect in a way. But, I think there is still this real gap about I'm struggling. And I'm almost battling to deal with the second half of the question, because the first one is the one that just sticks out to me. And I'd love sort of some input from my colleagues around some of the things which can be done to kind of break down the stigma in society, because I think it's a societal issue. So that's, it's so pervasive in our, and I think you look at these stats where a huge proportion of the workforce is suffering with a mental challenge as we speak. Yet, if you look at EAP numbers and you look at the number of people who kind of are asking for help, the numbers are much smaller. And that, to me, the gap signals a massive problem. And I know there's a leadership role in it, but I'd love to hear the perspectives of my colleagues.
Thank you. Crossing fingers for you, Keletjo.
Let's try.
That's right.
It's
a good times a charm.
Yeah. I have missed obviously a couple of the responses that both Yemi and Steven have given, but I think from the issue that mental health, the stigma that's associated to it, I agree with you, Steven. It is a societal issue. And I think employers should not make it even more difficult for employees to deal with it. That employers also have, to some extent, a role to play in it in terms of the safety that is created, or that it is safe to speak up when you've got issues, and that will not be used against an employee in one way or the other. The idea that the organization is empathetic, the managers are empathetic, and they will listen to the issues and direct you or direct employees to the right place to get the help. Because the truth is, we have as a society a long way to go in the ways in which we deal with mental health issues. And I believe that organizations, as they form part of society, also have a role to play. And I don't think anybody really has got the full answers at the moment. And it's almost this constant trial and error in terms of what we attempt and seeing whether or not it works based on the data that we get back from the employees. So that's my take on that.
Okay. I'm going to come over. Am I still on mute?
No, you're not. You're fine.
Oh, thanks. I'm going to come over to the questions. now, and we have one from Voy Julie again, maybe not directly related to the employee experience, but very related to what HR practitioners should be thinking about in this day and age. And he or she is asking, given the shift in the workplace, what competencies must HR practitioners strive to acquire? Do you want to take that for us, Yemi?
Okay, so I think just this morning I came across new HR competencies that I am fully aligned with. And what we're saying, people are probably not going to hear me talk about reward or talent attraction. The skills that we need today, and these are skills that they've been in discussions for the last 3 to 5 years, talking about the future of work. However, the future is now here. And like I said, we are in the now of work. Skills include advanced human capability. Collaboration is key now as a key competency for HR people. Remember, I said that we shouldn't sit somewhere and churn up policies and initiatives for the organization or for employees. This is the era of collaboration. We need to delve more to understand the businesses. Businesses have taken a hit in the last 1 year. This is not the time to just go back to leadership and say, can we have salary increases? The CEO is going to be looking at you and say, excuse me? Are you familiar with the numbers? Are you familiar with the operations? Yeah, that's Dave Ulrich. Thank you. Thank you, Voy. Yeah, I mean, we need to be involved in the business. We need to mobilize information. This is data aid. This is information. And it's not information or data for the sake of it. It is because we want to advance the cost of the business. So HR needs to get out a bit more and understand the business and understand the people and understand the behavior of the customers, understand more technology and understand everything about the business. This is the time for human resources to simplify things that are complex. Let's not go to leadership and stop and start dropping those jargons about HR speak, etc. And everybody's looking at us and saying, what are you talking about? But let's simplify things. Let's collaborate more. Let's help to accelerate business. And let's work more with leadership from a collaboration perspective to advance the cost of the workforce so that even when human resources isn't there, the organization can still continue, right? We are going to be in business for a long time. It just means that the shape or the manner or the form of HR is going to change or has changed over time. What HR needs to see itself as right now, it's not just only a department within the organization. It should see itself as KPMG within the business, as external consultants, as Mercer, as PwC, i.e. if you're not given the right sort of advisory to the business, then there is no need for the business to give you your fees. If you think about HR from that perspective, then our mindset will begin to shift gradually.
Thank you very much, Yemi. We're running out of time now, but we have a lot more comments rather than questions. So I'd like to read some of these comments out because I think they're very important. One, Kyle Black says, I completely agree with Yemi. Much like HR is not responsible for performance management, it shares that responsibility with line managers. So Kyle is speaking to the fact that, you know, HR can only be responsible for a share of the initiatives, but in terms of driving and implementation thereof, a line has to take a larger responsibility. I think Tenji shares the same sentiment. Celeste Serin, who is a very valued member of our community as well, says, employees offer such constructive input, insights, and operational functional wisdom. I view this as such a missed opportunity. Why are leaders not getting on the ground to understand and listen? Well, there is a question there, actually. And Steven, before we close, I know we might run over a little bit, but why are leaders not, you know, taking advantage of the collective knowledge and experiences of their workforce in order to create solutions?
That's a very, very, it's sort of its own webinar on its own. But for me, it's about a shift in the mindset of the leader, from being the all-answering, all-guiding, all powerful leader to an empathetic, human-centered, a person who is quite prepared to unlearn. And I think if you look at a number of reports, including the work that Mercer's done, but equally the World Economic Forum, which I know they're heavily involved in, you'll see that these skills of the future are talking to these very things that you've just mentioned, Sundula. So we need leaders who can give up and unlearn. And if they unlearn, we can find ourselves in a new dimension of work that I think will bring more purpose and meaning and happiness to everyone.
All right, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of today's discussion. I'd like to thank all our speakers for joining us on what I think has been a very insightful discussion and very important. Like I said, we are all feeling exhausted. People, I'm sure, are submitting leave just to sit at home and watch television because we are tired, man. And that's why I think it was such an important conversation. That said, I'd like to thank you all again and point your attention to our next webinar, which is taking place on the 5th of May, where we're going to be discussing recruitment and how to find talent without losing your mind. Very much a recruitment conversation. A lot of organizations are still fortunate to be recruiting in this time, and given the age that we're in, having to find creative ways of doing so. So thank you again to all our panelists and also to our attendees for joining us for this awesome conversation. Cheers.
Yes. Bye.
Bye-bye.